Today's conversation is called Climate Ambition versus Political Reality. We have with us Mr. Erik Solheim, former Minister of Climate and the Environment of Norway, and former Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme. This episode is for young climate professionals who are confused and also maybe a little frustrated with how what's happening in the world. We hear strong climate promises, but we also see slow action on the government side. And if I may say so, continued fights over oil and gas reserves. Many young people are asking how these two realities coexist. Mr. Solheim, thank you for joining us.
Very happy to be with you. Thanks for engaging with me.
Let me start with the big picture. So, climate ambition today is very high. Science is clear, impacts are visible, yet sometimes political action remains a little slow and uneven. From your experience inside government and global institutions, why does climate ambition so often fail to translate into political action?
I think there has been one big issue behind this up to this point historically, and that is very simple. If a nation wanted to grow its economy, it could only be done on the basis of fossil fuels. I mean, that's how it started. The Industrial Revolution started in the United Kingdom based on coal, spread to Germany, to the United States, to Japan, Korea, China, to India. And it was always the same. You want to get prosperous, you have to develop coal and oil and gas. But the very good news is, of course, that is the past. If you switch from coal to solar, it's not a cost, it's a cost saving. You save money, you get more money for your nation, more money for education or health, or more money for your company or your family if you switch to solar. So we are in a completely new situation. And for that reason, we see two major global shifts. One is a shift from a leadership which was centered on Europe and to some extent the United States into Asian-centered leadership, in particular China, but also in India. And the other is a shift from diplomacy to business. It's business which now is driving the change.
Is this mainly about lack of intent from the side of the countries, or also there are some constraints according to you?
The big constraint in the past was that it was very costly to take climate action. And you can, I mean, a developing country like, say, India would never put taking climate action ahead of bringing everyone out of poverty, creating a big middle class. And in the past, there was no way of combining economy and ecology, but now that's completely feasible everywhere in the world, since particularly solar, but also hydropower, wind, and other renewables are the cheapest energies. So the big constraint was the cost of taking climate action. I may also add that sometimes environmentalists framed climate action in a very boring way with a lot of acronyms and difficult words. So they really did not get the sufficient attention of, say, the working class or average people, farmers or retired people.
Many young people also face this problem about acronyms and big words and complicated definitions. That's something that we also try to solve in Climate Policy 101. But coming on to my next question, many young people often enter the climate policy space thinking that solutions will drive decisions. But in reality, the climate outcomes are shaped by geopolitics, national interest, and power. My question is, what is the relationship between global politics and climate outcomes?
But let me bring a little bit more optimism into this and give you some facts about what's happening in India and what's happening in China at the moment. Look, I was just in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh, where Greenko, which is one of the lead Indian middle-sized energy companies, have established was the largest and integrated solar, wind, and hydropower as battery facility in the world. It's 6.5 gigawatt. Well, that's as much as the entire grid in Nigeria, or it's double all hydropower in Nepal, just to make a couple of comparisons. I mean, it's big, big, big. There's nothing like that in the United States, nothing like that in Europe. Only China has something similar to this facility in Andhra Pradesh. Moving on to Gujarat, where Adani is now constructing what should be the largest solar facility in the world, 30 gigawatt, even bigger. And it's in construction. I've been there, I've seen hundreds of trucks there and thousands of workers. So this is not a fantasy for the future. This is happening now, and it will put India into the leadership. China is moving even faster. Just last year, China added more than 300 gigawatt of solar energy to the grid. That's much more than any nation in the world has done except China, of course, has done in the entire history of that nation. And if you go to any Chinese city now, all buses are electric, all scooters are electric, all taxis are electric, and 60% of new cars are electric. So it's a completely new situation. Previously, the Chinese cities were very polluted. Now the air is fresh. You can go running at any time, even in midwinter, where in the past it was very polluted.
I think India and China and other countries, the middle powers, as the term is now repeatedly used today in the speeches at Davos as well, they are coming up with their own capabilities and capacities. But political will, as you mentioned, is often cited as the missing piece in climate action. And from a few major powers, far more than from anyone else, it is kind of getting distracted. In recent times, we have seen that there are mixed or rather very direct and clear signals from one large economy, including retreat from climate leadership and multilateral engagement. So, according to you, why does it matter so much and what happens when it weakens?
There is, in reality, only one major power retreating. I mean, Europe, India, China, all the other nations in the global south are moving ahead. So, of course, we're talking about the United States of America. Well, look, the United States is 4% of the global population. Of course, it's much more important in economic and political and in particular military terms. But there is no way the United States can stop the rest of the world from moving ahead. All of us can move ahead. Prime Minister Modi can take India forward. President Xi Jinping can take China forward, and Europe can move ahead. Added to that, even in the United States, there are huge limits to the power of President Trump. He cannot uninvent the solar panel. He cannot uninvent the electric car. Everyone who's bought an electric car want to keep it and tell the neighbors that you should also have an electric car. In my nation, in Norway, 95% of all new cars sold are now electric. And I never ever met a person who had bought an electric car and said, oh, I want to go back to the gasoline car. Because you don't need to be an environmentalist to prefer the electric car. It's much more high-tech, much more autonomous, much more easy to heat in winter, and that matters in cold climate. Much more comfortable, much less pollution, much less noise. I mean, for every perspective, whether you're an environmentalist or even if you hate the environment, you still prefer the electric car as long as you have got the opportunity to try it. So Trump cannot stop these developments, and also the United States will slow down a little bit because of Trump, but the long-term effect may be relatively minor.
But reading the headline news, it kind of comes as a question to young professionals. They start questioning the whole system itself, whether it is UNFCCC COPs or whether it is the G20s. We kind of see that decisions are not very fast moving, and rightly so. Negotiations take their sweet time to conclude, and all process takes time. But when we talk about multilateralism, slowly we are seeing that it is kind of being questioned a lot. Is it actually losing relevance, or is it just simply operating within tighter political limits?
I think we need to keep two thoughts at the same time. I mean, you're absolutely right that multilateralism is in a crisis. That's because we are moving from one era to another. I mean, the 19th century was dominated by a few colonial powers. I mean, the United Kingdom could make havoc in India, as well as in Africa and the Caribbean and many other places. France was doing largely the same in Vietnam and Algeria and a few other places. And then the 20th century was dominated by the United States of America. We are now moving into a new era. The old system is broken, doesn't work, and we all understand it will change. I mean, for example, India is not on the Security Council of the United Nations. India is an economy, the third largest in the world now. It's rapidly has the highest economic growth in the world. It's the most populous nation in the world. India is not there. United Kingdom and France are there. Why? Because they were huge colonial powers 8 years ago, not because they're powerful today. So we have a system which is broken and need to be repaired. And I agree that multilateralism for this reason is in a crisis. But I'm pretty sure you meant to be able to fix that and put again multilateralism central, because obviously there are a number of issues we can only sort out together. No nation alone can, for example, fight a pandemic. We saw it very clearly under COVID.
And I want to also ask the question that many young climate professionals struggle with privately. They don't say it out often. But why should this still work in the field when often political leaders prioritize security and geopolitics over highly ambitious climate action? From your experience, how can these young professionals still be effective despite all such limits?
Because there are huge opportunities in this field. I mean, if you take India as an example, the really big companies in India like Adani, Reliance, Tata, they all do a lot in this area. We have a huge number of middle-sized companies like Renew or Greenco, as I mentioned, in this area. There are a huge number of civil society groups who act for a better environment. And the Indian government is very firm that India want to go in a greener direction. I mean, I listen very often to Prime Minister Modi because he's the main speaker at events and I'm one of the other speakers. And never ever does he deviate from his message that there is no ecology and economy. India can do both the economy and protect Mother Earth by the same policies. And India is also blessed in the sense that no opposition leader is opposing this message. So on this broader issue of moving in a greener, a more climate-friendly direction, there is broad agreement, both from political leaders and business in India. So there will be a huge amount of opportunities here in the future. And of course, exactly the same is the case in China. In Europe, there are a few more dissenters who don't really like climate action, but they are a small minority. The vast majority of people, political leaders, and business understand the need for action.
And also talking again about the relationship that we spoke about between global politics and climate outcomes, I'm trying to also ask you from a bigger picture lens because you had a lot of experience in the multilateral space. How much, according to you, of the climate delay that we are seeing currently, and not talking about India and China only, talking globally, is really about protecting the strategic interests or prioritizing economic growth? How much of the delay can be really about that?
I think that's an excellent question. And let me take China as an example to illustrate the point, because climate action in China didn't really start with climate. It started with pollution. People in China were so tired of the horrible pollution in the big cities like Beijing, and they sent a message to the political leaders, please take action, please stop this, let's get fresh air. And the political leaders understood it and started acting. And then they made two realizations. This was good for the economy because moving to electric cars, to solar panels, to windmills, hydropower plants created a huge amount of jobs. And then another realization, this is also very good for energy security because both China and India import nearly all its oil. Well, if you import your oil, you are dependent on Russia or Saudi Arabia or maybe my nation Norway, at least someone else who sell you the oil. However, the sun is Chinese or Indian, or of course French or German or American, but the sun is a domestic resource. The more you utilize energy from the sun, from your big rivers, from wind, you base your development on domestic resources. So that is the strength of the climate message now. It's not just about climate, but it's about climate action as well as prosperity, as well as energy security, all by the same policies. Whenever India replaces 1 barrel of imported oil with a solar panel or a solar farm, well, it becomes more prosperous and it becomes more energy secure and it creates jobs and it does well for the climate and environment.
That's wonderful. And also talking about negotiation space, which I'm referring to COPs here, there's one question floating nowadays. Now that the US had already withdrawn from the Paris Agreement and now they're out of the UNFCCC as well, there are two sides to this situation. So which side do you think is correct? One side says that now they're out of it, things will be more peaceful for negotiators, there will be no wrecks in the negotiation. One side says that the biggest climate funder is now gone and a big economic power is now gone, and that will disrupt the process and weaken the whole negotiation space. What do you think about this?
I think the first is the right, because I don't think all these public funds are so important. I mean, at the end of the day, the vast amount of money for the climate transition will have to come from private sector and from banks, insurance, and normal financial institutions, as well, of course, from all those companies who see opportunities in this area. So it will not be a lot disrupted by the policies of the United States. I mean, many American businesses and banks, etc., will of course take part in this transition, even if that's not the policy of the president. So when the US is just there to obstruct, it's better that they are not attending. In the International Maritime Organization, they had negotiations last year on rules for shipping, climate rules for shipping. And the US negotiators were even threatening people, saying that putting threats to negotiators from other nations. For example, saying that you will never get a visa to the United States if you vote in favor of nations. We cannot have international conversations like that. So then it's better that the US is not there. There will be future presidents in the US who may rejoin the global processes. American business want to join. Many American states want to join. I mean, California, for example, is by itself a huge economy. I think California would be among the 10 biggest economies in the world, even if it was a separate state. So we are much better off with the United States outside, as long as it's just sabotaging. And the rest of the world can move ahead, and with the support of many Americans.
Also about this whole space, although things move slow, but there is always progress every year. But one question that usually comes to the minds of young professionals is that is it really making some change on a level as big as the problem is of climate change? And United Nations is at the forefront of driving such change. Do you think that it is creating an impact?
I think these climate talks are useful, even if the impact is not enormous. I mean, for example, they have just set the rules for the carbon market, where say the Indian state of Tamil Nadu is improving its mangroves, then it can get support from the carbon market for protecting the mangroves. Or the state of Andhra Pradesh is moving into green agriculture. They can also be supported by the carbon market. And money in the carbon market is much more likely to flow than all this public money, which tends to be very bureaucratic and very slow. So there is not zero impact from the talks. But the main happening now is in business. Look, in 2009, we had the catastrophe of all climate talks. It was in Copenhagen. The weather was bad, the food was horrible, and the expectation was very, very high. The new Jesus Christ was coming from the United States of America, called Barack Obama, and he should solve all problems. That was the expectation. Manmohan Singh was there for India, Premier Wen from China, and all Chancellor Merkel from Europe. Everyone was there. Enormous expectation. Basically, nothing happened. But what not one single person at that meeting said was that, look, in the next 10 years, the price of solar energy will fall by more than 90%. Price of wind energy will fall by 85%. Well, that's what's driving the action now. Solar energy is so cheap anywhere in the world. It can happen by the market as long as just governments make the right regulations of the market.
In terms of politics again, how do you see, because you've worked with organizations in the West, and now I see you very active with Indian organizations as well and in South Asia. How do you see the politics of these two, the South and the global North? And what can the global South learn from global North politics or vice versa?
Yeah, of course, 10 years ago, I mean, the global South basically could learn a lot from Europe, because at that time, Europe was leading on climate and environment. Today, I would say, if you want to be inspired and learn on climate and environment, well, you should go to Beijing, you should go to Shenzhen, which is the tech capital of China, you should go to Delhi, you should go to Jakarta. The Indonesians are doing fantastic work when it comes to protection of the rainforest. While Europe was in the lead 10 years ago, Asia is now in the lead. And the main thing which Europe can learn, or the two main things Europe can learn from a place like India, one is to forget all the ideas that there is a choice between environment and economy. It's one process. We go forward, creating jobs and prosperity by solar and wind and hydro energy. And the other is to speak about the environment in a popular language, so make it a message for everyone. Here, Europe struggling, it's again very often a message just for the young and trendy rather than from everyone, and very often still spoken as if there is a choice between economy and ecology.
As we look ahead, I want to end with one final question. If there is one political reality that every young person who's entering the climate policy space should understand very clearly for the coming years, what will be that one political reality?
I tend to believe it's what we just talked about, to always understand that you must frame the message, make your business in such a way that it appeals to everyone, not just to a small group of young intellectuals in, say, Bengaluru, but to a wide variety of people with different aims, and frame the message of environment so that everyone can embrace it. I mean, every Indian, every Chinese, every European, every Norwegian, I'm a Norwegian, has a love for nature. You just need to tap into it, speak about it, and understand that people want to protect Mother Earth, but they also at the same time want to improve their lives. So this combination of ecology and economy and speaking a people's language, I think is the way forward for everyone. And even if you are young, avoid difficult words, avoid speaking a very intellectual language, avoid just appealing to your student compatriots, but try to frame it for everyone.
That's very wonderfully put. And I totally agree with the fact that you should be as simple as possible without complicating things around you. Mr. Solheim, thank you for laying this out so honestly. This conversation doesn't remove frustration, I know, but it will definitely replace confusion with some clarity among the young professionals. And clarity is what we actually need to stay effective. So we try to understand how climate ambition meets political reality. This was Climate Policy 101. Thank you for listening.